all the character design tips and tricks from all the popular art YouTube channels, all consumed by me, adding my own little spice on it to create my characters Gideon and Willow, while at the same time showing you guys how I'm applying those tips and tricks in real time. I'll leave a link to the character design videos I referenced in this video, all in the description. Hope you guys enjoy the video. Please like, subscribe, and engage with it so that more people get to see it. The character designs / models that I'll be using for this video are Gideon Banbury and Willow Want More. And these are characters that are from my series Apple Black. All the details about Apple Black you'll be able to find in the description. The designs here are kind of based off of how they would have looked, say, a decade-ish before the current events that are taking place in the series right now. And so it's kind of like the idea I've been playing around with, almost like a spin-off idea. Short thing, not too long running or anything, and we're actually thinking about producing a light novel, and I'll give details about that in the future. But for those who are, interested in reading light novels, let me know in the comments. I don't know how many of my subscribers are actually interested in something like that. It'll be called something different. It'll probably have Apple Black still in the title some way. It'll kind of have like a Logan vibe, a Last of Us vibe, a Black Sails vibe. It'll get some influence from series that I like, while still being true to what's going on in Apple Black and the world that I've built so far with wands and orbs and all of that. Apple Black's a world of sorcery. It's very shonen as well. But let me know in the comments for anyone who'd be interested in the light novel. That's something we're thinking about. It's not set in stone, but there's a good chance it's gonna happen. Willow is a young black girl with vitiligo. Gideon is black albino, and even Opal, who we've met, is black as well, but she has freckles, so there's always usually something with their skin. So getting started, based off of my knowledge and experience, and then the extra research from all these art YouTubers, the first thing you want to know when you're designing your character is the who is. Who is this character, he or she or whatever. You want to kind of have all of that nailed down. Get familiar with the character. What are the themes of the character? What do they represent on all levels? What they mean to you? What do they mean or represent from a symbolic perspective? What's the story of the character? What's the overlining arc of the character? Where are you going here? In some cases, that kind of ties into the world of the character, because they can go hand in hand. They can kind of feed off of one another. So to a degree, in some cases, you might want to develop the world first, but it's really up to you. You can feed off either or to kind of build either or. Just be open to experimentation. So sometimes you might create the characters before the world, or vice versa. And even if you create, say, the world first and then the characters, sometimes you can develop something about the characters that makes you go back to change something about the world. So you can keep going back and forth until you have what you want. They're all drafts until it's final. It's really up to you and what works best for you. But sometimes that can help the setting of the world and how they fit into that world. So that will also come into the world building and all of that. And one of the things that have helped me when I'm designing characters, especially if I know exactly who they are before I'm putting together any sketches or anything like that, are simple character briefs that go deep down into their behavior and just knowing everything about that, like what kind of person they are on that level, and maybe even little tiny quirks about them. Those little quirks can make them feel a little more human or relatable in a superficial sense, but still relevant depending on how you execute.
Queen, dragon, intimidating, regal. You write a few words that describe your character, and that gives you the brief.
Coming into this, there are already certain elements of these characters, especially with, Willow and Gideon for this video, that have already been decided, or I decided long before this video, so I'll kind of be basing it off of that, while still trying to do some interesting stuff with the tips and tricks that we found from all these other YouTubers. Who is Willow Want More? Willow is a young black girl with vitiligo. She also has white dreadlocks with dark roots and a nose ring. Beautiful apricot colored eyes, subject to change to be honest. Willow's very energetic, she's wild. She's a brash young lady with a soft spot. It's present, it's hard to find, but it's there. She can be really stubborn and has a strong sense of right and wrong. Currently right here she's 9, or at least 9-ish. We'll get to her other details as we go on in the video. She has a wand that's Nova Jinx that you will see me tie in with her design as well. Then Gideon is a really built dude, very muscular with a menacing physique. He has short, whitish blonde hair, really cool sideburns, with like dirty metal gold glasses, and the design also covers his nose. Piercing eyes as well. It looks like he's in his early 50s, but a big dude. Powerful dude. And then I'll give more details as the video goes on. Apple Black Chapter 1 actually touches on Gideon just a little bit, and that's how, certain elements of his design have already been decided, especially in his facial features. I've had old videos also designing Gideon as well, like really old videos where, I've made slight tweaks here and there if you've been paying attention. And hopefully by the end of this video, we'll end up with a design completely from top to bottom that I'm happy with. Because for the most part, I already knew how he looked facially, right, for the most part, but I've never really finalized the design of, what he's wearing and how his wand is going to look and stuff like that, or even Willow's wand. I've just had them at the back of my head without fully fleshing them out visually just yet, but I have ideas of what they were going to be, and so I'll be touching on all those ideas and seeing which one works best. Because certain shots of Gideon have already appeared in the book of Apple Black, I'm going to kind of stick to that. No choice, it's already out there, so certain elements of Gideon have already been finalized. And for the most part, I'm happy with it. I did make slight tweaks in the remastered version of Apple Black, so it does look different now than it looked with the first printing of Apple Black that came out years ago. The next one would be Iconography and Semiotics. So Iconography, didn't see too much about that. According to Google, is basically like a particular range or systems of types of images used by artists to convey particular meanings. So sometimes there will be something on a character and maybe that has some kind of otherworldly meaning that's being added into this piece, and sometimes you can have a combination of symbols on a character meaning several different things. It's really like symbolism to a degree. It's either what they mean or what they're heavily associated with, and you can kind of do your research to see what works for you or your character based off of what they mean or what they're associated with. For example, doves can represent like peace or purity. Maybe the color white also can represent purity. Apples can represent, say, the beginning of something, and it kind of has some religious ties as well. So you want to be aware of the meanings of certain terms and items and whatever you're using, so that comes with you doing your research. But iconography overall is something that's used heavily with character design. And then in some cases, if done right, it can make a character seem more recognizable, maybe more popular or something, and maybe part of that iconography is just so unique that the character really stands out. Once, say, a viewer sees just maybe 3 parts of the character, they already know who that character is, without being given the full picture. If someone can recognize a character, it kind of shows how recognizable the character is, how popular the character is, how successful the character design is. But at the end of the day, some of these are subjective, but you should have them at the back of your mind. And then semiotics is a similar deal, maybe a little less dense, the study of signs and symbols and their use or interpretation. Super Eyepatch Wolf has a really good definition and explanation in his character design video
of semiotics. Semiotics, to brutally oversimplify, is the study of symbols and how different visual objects come together to create meaning. For example, if we combine a pillow, a mattress, a quilt, and a bed frame, we will get the concept of a bed. Individually, these objects have very limited meaning, but combined, they carry the cultural and societal context of a bed and everything that a bed is associated with. And to once again grossly oversimplify, this is the very basics of how character design works. The different visual components of a character coming together to create meaning.
It's just kind of simplifying things. If the character is a chef, then you would want to have some items and symbols that can be tied to being a chef or something that has to do with the kitchen, and adding that to the character design. So be a chef hat, if it's a cowboy, maybe a cowboy hat and stuff like that. If the character is a cowboy samurai, then you maybe have a cowboy hat and then you give the character a katana, but then overall samurai gear. I don't think I've actually seen that before, but you catch my drift. If you know the character from the first tip, you can kind of write down a list of things that maybe you can kind of connect to other items or symbols to help put it all together and form your character. But little key details about the character, how they behave, certain things about them, certain things about their occupation, rank, what they do, and seeing how you can tie that to the iconography or the semiotics in any way. At least in any way that makes sense to you. Because at the end of the day, it's your character, things are subjective, just have a blast and have fun. As long as you're being honest with yourself and you can justify the decisions you're making, then at least you're on the right path. And maybe you can get some feedback from people you respect with credentials or some kind of credibility when it comes to character design. For Willow's semiotics or iconography or all the details that I'll kind of be using to flesh everything else out, with all the other tips that we'll go over. Key things that I have to keep at the back of my mind is she's somewhat of a rebel, she's defiant, like I said, brash and loud, a little stylish, wild, stubborn, a runaway. And those are like little things that I keep in my mind. Things that make her recognizable will be the vitiligo, obviously, the nose ring, the way her hair is tied together, white hair, specifically white hair with the dark roots, and you know, you can tie that to meaning whatever you want to mean without going into too much detail just yet. And then her wand that's kind of tied in her hair, right, like a little whip, but it's like a golden whip, and there's certain golden wands within Apple Black that are like, you know, part of this legend of golden wands, so they're kind of special. So that kind of makes her recognizable to the other characters in the series, but also to us. And then some bandage wraps that I feel just make her look a little gritty, like dirty bandages and stuff like that. Certain elements of her to feel a little worn, so not all parts of her design need to be like bright colors. Some of Gideon's iconography would be, you know, having all that gold around him, kind of similar to Willow a little bit. Again, it's part of the connection, which I'll leave to the story and how the story kind of puts that together. But unique set of glasses that covers his nose as well, him being albino, the golden wand, again, that whole thing's coming back. Some of his clothes are dirty and worn. It's almost like he's this warrior from a past life and is coming back. There is that element to Gideon. I even touch on that again in chapter 1 about this whole thing, how he's kind of come back for the dead, or at least that's part of the legend. And without giving too much away, I'll just end it at that. Again, he's a ghost to this world to a degree. He's also a rebel, and he's also like a king, at least a king of these rebels. He's kind of like their leader, it's their father figure. He's also a sorcerer, just like Willow. A criminal to this new world again, and a very calm but very persistent guy. Stubborn in his own way, but not necessarily brash and loud. Not that kind of stubborn. Keep in mind with the items and symbols and all of that, maybe you're adding accessories to the characters, especially if they're maybe similar type of accessories that you're just adding on and slapping onto the design. You want to have them be in threes. That's one thing you could pick up from one of the Ross Draw videos that I watched.
The threes rule is very popular, and you'll hear a lot in your artistic journey. It's actually everything in life: big, medium, small, foreground, middle ground, background, gold, silver, bronze. 3 is just a magic number biologically engineered inside our brains. So the 3 features Lyra's encompasses is her dragon tail hair, dragon claws, and her crescent earring.
But also, it's kind of like a universal rule. Most things are in threes. Most film franchises, 3. Powerpuff Girls, 3. Charmed, 3. Ninja Teams in Naruto, 3. Harry Potter, 3. The Trinity symbol in my series Apple Black, 3. 3 strikes and you're out. Game of Thrones, I'm pretty sure it wasn't the 2-eyed raven or the 5-eyed raven. It was the 3-eyed raven. I am number, 4. But nobody really likes that movie anyway, so it doesn't really count. And what comes before 4? 3. You're right. I rest my case. But obviously you can break the rule every now and then. Maybe you do 2. Usually want to stay under 5, unless the narrative or the story kind of calls for it. But in general, 3 is like a magic number. Certain numbers are pretty powerful. 3, maybe 7, 23, 11, 1, 2, 5, 13 is another one. But for simple things, 3. Anything over that, I don't know. The next is shape language, again under that iconography umbrella, but they're basically simple geometric shapes. They kind of represent meaning and personality, and they're usually broken down into 3. Those are the triangle, the square, and the circle.
But what this really comes down to is line and shape. Perhaps one of the best breakdowns I've ever seen of this concept is from the artist Tato, who last year put out these fantastic pieces of Overwatch fan art, breaking the characters down into their most fundamental aspects. Tato later uploaded a tutorial for their methodology, explaining how each character was essentially made up of one or more of 3 fundamental shapes, and depending on which shapes you use, that particular aspect of the character will be accentuated. Anna is just a giant triangle, showing the veteran sniper's cunning competence. Or even look at how these different shapes combine to give different feelings. For example, the King of Edgelord's Reaper is represented by a square and a triangle, representing both his competence on a team while also accentuating his aggressive, angry nature.
Another good tip by the Tomato? The round circular shape is usually associated with charisma, being harmless and endearing. The box or squarish shape is more associated with being reliable, uniform, and traditional. And then triangle is associated with being cunning, dynamic, competent. And maybe if the triangle is pointing downwards, you're seen as a little more aggressive.
Both these characters are defined by their large, muscular frames. But the thing that separates them is the visual language used in their depiction. Takeo is essentially a large, beveled square. He has no harsh edges or unsightly detail. He's depicted with these simple, sloping lines, which make the character feel warm and cozy. While Toguro, on the other hand, is built out of aggressive, angular shapes, each minute muscle grossly depicted with gnarled, knotted lines.
Maybe more mysterious, more villainous, or whatever. Not that it will only be applied to villains, but it can be applied to both parties. But let's say you have a character that's good, but maybe they have a little edge to them, then maybe you can find certain parts of the design to incorporate a triangle shape. Now, obviously, not a literal triangle shape, but if the overall shape of the item on the character or the character overall, whether it's the body, the clothing, whatever is being used to represent that shape, it doesn't necessarily have to be the shape exactly, but at least to a degree it can be broken down into that shape. All three kind of mean different things, and you kind of want to use each appropriately depending on your character's behavior and the way they think and certain things about them and how that ties into the shape. Now, you can use all the shapes at once, but maybe you use some more than others because maybe your character ties in more with one of the shapes than the other. So if you had a list of traits that your character had, and then you broke those traits down into percentages, right? Then the shape that was in line with the trait that had the highest percentage, your character would look more like that shape. Again, a little bit depends on your art style, but to a degree.
We have a lot of curves, kind of circle and rounded shapes, and then she's aggressive. The features are sharp. That jawline, got that nose. See here, that Lyris doesn't have many square shapes. She's not like a tanker, she's not that heavy. She's elegant and sharp. It's your job to understand how much of each shape your character will have. I say her elegantness is maybe 70%, and her sharpness is 40%.
There are certain ways that you can add that shape to your design, and depending on your art style, sometimes the whole character could look like that shape. Where you see some characters that just look like a circle, or another character that just looks like a square.
Like, this is already giving you a sense of stability, trust, and stubbornness. And the shape here, friendly, bouncy, soft, welcoming, warm, and happy. And this shape has the sharpest corners of the three, implying things like edginess, danger, intensity, and speed.
That's kind of how it's done. The shapes could be shown in their pose, their clothing, certain accessories, their body overall, certain details about them, certain maybe the shape of their eyes. SpongeBob is basically a square, Kirby is a circle, Patrick is a circle with some triangles around him, like a triangle for his head and maybe some of his limbs. So I'll do the same for Willow's shape language, you know, round, box, triangle, and based off of Tomato's explanation, I've kind of broke her down to maybe charismatic, she's like 19%, harmless, 7%, endearing, 11%. Reliable, 17, uniform, 2, traditional, 1, cunning, maybe 8%, dynamic, 17, competent, 9, you know? And that's what I'll go with for her shape language. And then I'll do the same thing with Gideon. Gideon, for me, the shape language would be maybe round, charismatic, maybe 11%, harmless, 1%, because homeboy is harmful, 9%, endearing, 21% reliable dude, so, you know, maybe that would be like the highest. 2% uniform, 2% traditional, 13% cunning, 15% dynamic, 16% competent. And that's what we're going to go with. And based off of those percentages, I'll know what shapes to use more than others. In general, you kind of want to make it be clearly one shape more so than the other two, at very best two, but it's never completely balanced between all three. So from this, Willow will be more round and triangle, while Gideon will be a little more box and triangle. And with characters that are a little more layered and multi-dimensional, and maybe the art style is a little more realistic. It's, again, harder to see these shapes, but they're there. If it was a story that was a little more basic, a very simple, very kid-friendly, they would even stick further to just one shape. So to see the shapes with my characters here with Willow, I kind of have that bow, her wand, Nova Jinx is tying her hair at the top. It's kind of going round, her face is a little roundy, the way her hoodie's tied around her kind of gives some triangle shapes, and the way she's posed is also helping to telegraph that as well. So this is how you kind of spot those little things here and there. And then with Gideon, I put like the circles, like the shoulder pads, and that's kind of like his cloak. And in the series, they're like cloak is also a form of clothing, and his cloak there, it's almost mechanical to a degree, but it has those round bumps to show that there is that roundy touch to him, but it's mostly primarily the triangles and the squares that help define him. Even the way he's standing, all of that is telegraphing that language. The art style really allows the design telegraph the shape language, giving you an idea of what type of character they are. Another major one will obviously be color, like I mentioned earlier, and just color schemes and color theories. You want to find out all the colors that work together, so I recommend doing some research in color theory and, you know, colors that work best together, warm colors, monochromatic colors, cool colors, all of that. That's a whole other video on its own. You want to make sure not all the colors on the design are saturated, because it's going to do what we talked about before. It's going to hurt a focal point where the viewer is going to be confused at what parts to look at first, because all the colors are being so saturated and in their face, they'll be fighting for attention, and you don't want that. You want some parts more saturated than others. Also, using like a color symbolism chart that I found on Pinterest. Pinterest is a good source for reference and all sorts of things, to be honest. But using this color symbolism chart, I'm going to kind of pick specific colors that I feel would be relevant to Willow. Despite how many colors I pick, I just make sure that the colors that are more in line with who she is are the colors that I would use the most. So I'll almost break it down into percentages to make sure that, you know, the whole place isn't all sorts of colors and there isn't any focal point. So just looking at the chart, I can see a little bit of maroon, magenta, blue, white, brown, beige, amber, gold, yellow, teal, red. There's certain colors that I was going to use regardless, but then there's some that I'm going to add in just based off of this chart. Again, I'm kind of allowing myself to be open to all these techniques and seeing if the end result would be successful. With Gideon, I see a little teal, beige, gray, red, gold, burgundy, blue, brown, silver, white, black, green. Again, some colors that I was definitely going to use regardless, but then some colors that I feel, you know, just doing the test, seeing what happens. Another good tip you can pick from Tomato is with the ratio of the colors. So if, let's say you were working with 3 colors, you want one of the colors to kind of have the most room, the most land on the design. And if it's 3 colors, you can see here it's like a 60-30-10 rule. If it's 2 colors, it's kind of like a 70-30 rule, and you just kind of keep going down. So where the first color takes the most and the next color is kind of about half of the first and the next is about half. Now, all these rules can be broken. You don't necessarily need to always go in 3s or 2s and all of that, like I said before, with the colors you're picking. It's really up to you, but it's a good way to kind of not have the eyes be fighting all over the place where you have like a bajillion colors on one character design and stuff like that, where you have one color that's taking the most land, depending on how many colors you're using overall. Then you also learn a little bit about what colors to choose, and that kind of ties back into, you know, iconography and semiotics and stuff like that, where certain colors mean certain things. I talked a little bit about how white can mean purity and royalty and just a luxurious nature. Maybe silver, which is kind of whitish, could mean more of luxury. And so there are several guides to that and several types of interpreting what those colors mean. You just kind of want to pick one and be consistent. Here, this is where you can see me testing out other ideas, different colors, just to see maybe there's a combo out there that I've not really considered. But at this point, especially using the color symbolism chart, I'm kind of settled on the colors, but I'm doing this just to see other things. Again, having an open mind with the idea that maybe your first idea is not your best one. That said, I still settle for it. There are ways to do this in Photoshop where you just select a certain area, and as long as you're on that layer, you can mess around with the hues just to see different versions. There's several ways of doing this. You just do what works best for you. Other things would be iterations, gestures, and exaggeration. In some cases, when you're putting these designs together and using all these tips, you don't always want to go with your first idea. Usually, not always, your first idea is not your best idea. You might want to keep going at it and maybe take a step back and then come back later and try to do it again, and maybe don't even look at your previous references or whatever you need to do, and just explore other ideas, maybe add some exaggeration to a design and see how much life it brings or maybe takes away depending on your art style. Maybe don't overdo it, but be open to new ideas and new ways of doing things and testing out all these tips, whether it be the iconography or the shape language or color, which we will get to in a moment. Have an open mind. And even the design and how the character is posing for maybe a character sheet and a certain gesture of their whole body and all that. Explore other drawings, draw the character over and over again, because that will also help you get used to drawing that character, whether you've decided finally on what the design is or not. With these gesture drawings, I was just doing several versions just to see what would work best for, say, a character sheet, just to see the character full body. Playing around with poses that would really show what type of character she is. And then with the overall design, you want to make sure that there is a focal point somewhere. Like when you look at the character, there was just a part of the character that your eyes are drawn to initially. And usually it's in the face area, which is fine. You know, the face, chest, that area. But you need to, figure out what that is for you, and don't have the eyes kind of competing. Don't have the whole design kind of competing for the attention of the viewer's eyes. You just want to make sure that your overall design has a focal point and it's not all over the map and confusing and difficult to read. What are you doing?
I'm working. I'm just doing the thing.
What are you doing? Again, this will apply to everything I've mentioned so far and the things I'm about to mention, like the silhouette test. Usually you want to see the character in all black. In fact, you might even come up with a design in all black that's already interesting to look at before you even know what all the details are. Sometimes you can derive your design from just the black. But usually when you're done with the design, whether you did a silhouette in the beginning or not, maybe at the end of it, you do a silhouette test where you just blacken everything out and ask yourself if it's still interesting. And usually, again, it's subjective, it's up to you as long as you're being honest with yourself. But usually if certain proportions stand out, again, maybe you can see a sense of threes in here, some interesting parts of the character design that, make the viewer want to see the full thing versus just full black, where it's still garnering some interest, then I think you're in the green. Is the character still recognizable if you flatten it all out? If you flatten it all out in black. Now, in some cases, if for your design that nobody knows about yet or something like that, the question is just for you. But try it with popular characters. If you just flatten it all black, are they still recognizable? Those are what are generally considered a more successful character design. You can use the silhouette to just come up with a design. Maybe you come up with an interesting silhouette from out any details. You can do the same thing with the shape language. Maybe you just come up with a bunch of shapes that seem interesting, and then from that shape you kind of figure out the rest of the design. It's really up to you what you do. You can even have multiple versions and then mess with that. Eventually, the way her wand is tied on her hair, I kind of use it to form like a circle, which is kind of like a circle for the shape language, as well as forming somewhat of a halo. But I'm not sure if I want to treat it that much like a halo. I'm not 200% gung-ho on the idea that she's that kind of figure. But definitely giving that circle vibe for the shape language, I think it's in line with who she is. Having multiple versions here. At this point when I was doing it, I wasn't 200% gung-ho or sure about what the details would be. I just wanted an interesting silhouette first, just to test out a different approach. Iteration, which is the next thing we'll talk about, is crucial when doing character design. And then another thing would be to pick whatever your style is. You want to make sure it fits your story and has a little variety to it. So you might have a style, but that doesn't mean everyone kind of has to look the same. So no same face syndrome, basically. No same face syndrome, no same shape syndrome, same height. You see some series and all the characters are all the same height, all the same spiky hair, all the same eye size, you know what I mean? Spice it up. Add a little variety. And especially when you have an ensemble of a cast of characters, when you put them all together, do they all look interesting and make people want to be more engaged with whatever the content is? I think that's the way to go. Have your bald character. Not all the characters, have hair or spiky hair. Throw some beards in there. Give a lady a beard. Hell, I don't care. If all the characters are so different with their behavior and their background, why would they look the same or barely different? Are they all the same age? Switch it up, right? I'm not saying just be different and switch it up just to switch it up. I'm sure if you think critically about your characters, you will see where to switch it up appropriately. Have a variety of, where the characters are from. Explore different cultures and traditions and find interesting ways and appropriate ways, especially in the execution of how they are going to fit in the world you're building. All this stuff will come in handy in like a character lineup where you have all the characters side by side and you see the variety of the shape language or the silhouette test and all belonging to this world. This makes everything rich and interesting. It can also help build hype. Under variety would be diversity. What kind of characters they are. Not all the characters should behave the same. That's pretty obvious. Have some black characters, Hispanic characters, Asian, white. Have diversity of, ethnicity, mindset, ideology, gender, sexual orientation, as long as it makes sense to you. Facial features, height, weight, religion. Spice it up, especially if it's appropriate to do so for whatever world you're building or whatever cast of characters you're putting together. This is beyond just the visuals. Obviously, we're talking about maybe when you're writing your characters and writing your story, because that kind of ties into how your character designs end up being as well. So you kind of have to think ahead. And then you want to pick an art style that complements that world, that type of story. Do your research. None of the iconography or semiotics or any of that works if you're not doing your research on how to make sure that your character design is going towards the right direction. Also, especially if you're putting your series together, always feel free to show growth and character development. Sometimes that could be depicted through the design itself. You see series where the character is not always wearing the same thing, but whatever they're wearing is still in line of, maybe who they are overall still, or at least who they've become from that character growth. So be open to change, improvement, but that's consistent and has justification. Research the iconography. Don't go putting things and terms and certain symbols on your design and you can't really justify why you've made that decision, or worse, know what it even means. Nah, dude, I just put it in because it looked cool. Don't do that. It can be cool and you should be able to justify it. And that applies to everything, even naming the character. Everything about the character, or even your world or your story, the decisions you're having your characters make, all of that, you always need to do your research and feel strongly and confident in the decisions that you're making. Be practical in the design. You don't want to have a design that if somebody actually wore those clothes, they wouldn't be comfortable. If it was a character that doesn't like to be comfortable, maybe that will work. Keep all those kind of things in mind. You don't want to have a design where maybe it doesn't make sense for the character to even bend your arms in that clothing. You don't want to design that. So you want to make sure your clothing, your designs are practical. Definitely practicality is one I didn't see as much in other videos. That's what I'll just throw in here at the end. You want to make sure your design is actually practical. Imagine your design being put together for, say, a film. The filmmakers have trouble bringing that to life. Now, in some cases, you don't care, but at least know. You can see me trying to figure out Gideon's cloak there, how the clothing will actually cover his frontal area, how that cloth will actually travel, and maybe there'll be like a symbol in the front. I'm not sure. These are all drafts. Maybe the cloak has like this unique mechanical rack around it that the cloth would travel across to cover his clothing, but I'm working all of that out. Another tip would be exploring other character designs, other creators that might inspire you and give you influence to kind of put together what you're putting together. Research your favorite creators. Not copy, but get inspired. Let's say you have a character and you are getting influenced by other characters that you might deem similar, and just trying to put yourself in the shoes of the creators who have created characters that are similar to the one you're trying to create, and trying to think like them and see why they made the decisions they made for their world and why that's appropriate, and try to find what works for you. So you want to experiment a lot in that. You can mix and match some of the tips that we're given throughout this video. Maybe even screw everything I just said. Ignore some rules, bend some rules. As long as you know the rule and you can justify the decisions you're making, I think you're in the clear. But again, none of this is law. None of this is law. You can break them. As long as you know it, you're in the clear. Same applies to like concept arts, background art, props, environments, the list goes on. So that's all, folks. You guys should let me know if this design is actually successful, if all the tips and tricks that were used were actually, used properly. If any of the creators from those videos are watching this video, you can also let me know in the comments below. It's highly unlikely you're watching, but just in case you are, what's up? try to keep the characters very colorful. I do like that aspect of that present in my series. And also the series kind of being shonen series. Yes, it could appeal to an older audience, but it can also appeal to a younger audience. So I like the fact that it's a little bit colorful, and from a business standpoint, it gets a thumbs up from me. But also from a narrative standpoint, I want to make sure it's still true to that as well.
Again, the videos I'm referencing, the links will be in the description. I highly recommend you guys go watch them for yourselves. You're really great.
I also quickly designed Gideon's wand, which is a spyglass, and Willow, which is a whip that she's using to tie up her dreads. Not going to go into too much detail as to what they do, but it's pretty cool, so stay tuned. Also, if you notice, I have her vitiligo kind of forming the map of Africa on her face, because there's certain things that that map represents that could be tied into the narrative that I have planned, so we'll see.
For the 3 people that made it to the end of this video, you're a real one. Don't forget to like this video, United States, and smash that subscribe button and hit the bell so you stay notified each time I upload absolutely anything. Turn on all notifications. My social media, where you can read my comic for free, you can purchase volume 1, volume 2, all of that will also be linked in the description. Anything you possibly need will be in there.
So don't forget to check out our magazines, our shonen magazines, seinen magazines, josei magazines. Everything you could possibly need will be in the description. On the app, there is a starter guide that you can read that's pretty short that lets you know who we are, what we do, what our magazines are, and how to even use the app if you're very new to what we do. 2 free months of Skillshare. It's Whyt Manga, and I'm out. Well, what's the problem? Sup? It's Whyt Manga here. You enjoying the video? Don't forget to like, subscribe. Let's get that shmoney. Get off the shot. What? I don't get off the shot. I don't care. It's part of your thing, right? No? Check out for Black, Saturday AM, all that? No? Not today? Dog, you tripping. Being a sucker, bro. Yo, uptight. Crawl out of my butthole.